So my name is Teresa Hackett, and I am the Copyright and Libraries Programme Manager at EIFL, Electronic Information for Libraries, and we work to support and enable access to knowledge through libraries in developing and transition economy countries. And for our session today, we're going to be talking about an important meeting that's coming up at WIPO in Geneva in May. And I'm going to now share my screen with you so that you can see where we are going. So we're excited to have this session on getting ready for WIPO, in specifically the Standing Committee on Copyright and Related Rights, known as the SCCR, and it's meeting number 42, so SCCR 42. And we're particularly excited about this meeting because it's the first time we'll be able to meet all together in person in Geneva since the start of the COVID pandemic. So in this short session today, we wanted to give a recap on what is WIPO and what is SCCR, what's on the agenda for the meeting coming up in May, how to support libraries and the right to research at the SCCR, and how you can follow the meeting when it's happening in Geneva in May. If you have any questions during the session, please feel free to type them into the chat and we'll answer all the questions at the end. And if you would like to speak on camera, we can also make you a panelist, and you're welcome to speak on camera as well. So a brief recap on what is WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization. It's an intergovernmental organization, an IGO, and it's part of the UN family, but a specialized agency within the UN, so specializing in intellectual property. It's got its headquarters in Geneva, and there are currently 193 member states, and the Director General is Mr. Darren Tang from Singapore, who came to that post in 2019. And WIPO is an international forum for IP policy, information and services. So it's a policy forum that shapes international rules on intellectual property, including copyright. And it provides services to governments on protecting IP across borders and resolving disputes, for example, domain name, internet domain name disputes. It also has programs for governments for cooperation, capacity building and technical assistance. And it's a good source of information on all things to do with IP and copyright. So it has a database called WIPO-Lex, where you can search copyright laws for countries all over the world, or you can look up the contact details for your national copyright office. Now, importantly, WIPO also administers all the key copyright treaties, key international copyright treaties. So the Berne Convention from 1886, the WIPO Internet treaties from 1996, and then most recently, and of great importance to libraries, the Marrakesh Treaty for persons with print disabilities that was adopted by member states in 2013. And the committee that discusses all of these copyright issues is the Standing Committee on Copyright and Related Rights. So it is the global body that sets international copyright law and policy. And it was from this committee that the Marrakesh Treaty was negotiated. So the committee consists of member states, so representatives of member states, and observers. So that would be NGOs, civil society organizations, industry representatives. The member states consist of two types of representatives, if you like. You've got your Geneva-based delegates, who are based in the missions in Geneva, and they would be working for the Department of Foreign Affairs or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And then you have capital-based officials from your national copyright offices, and they will also come to Geneva as copyright experts to attend the meetings of the Copyright Committee. And then from the observer organizations, EIFL has observer status, IFLA, the International Council of Archives, International Council on Museums, and also many regional organizations and national organizations as well. And even though it's contrary to what it says, being observers, we can actually speak at the meetings. So when we are at the meetings, we don't only observe, but we do have an opportunity to make statements and interventions, and of course to interact directly with the delegates as well. And the SCCR meets usually twice a year, or at least it did meet twice a year until COVID. And during the COVID situation, the committee did meet a couple of times, but it was meeting in hybrid mode. So only the delegates who are based in Geneva could attend the meetings in person, and many of those joined from their offices. So now this is the first meeting where we'll all be back together in the room with NGOs and delegates from capitals and local Geneva-based delegates as well. And the member states organize themselves according to regional groups. So there's like 8 regional groups, the African group being one group, which is the largest regional group of 54 countries in Africa. Each group has a regional coordinator who is the coordinator for 1 year. So at the moment, the regional coordinator for the African group is the delegate from Algeria. Then we have the Asia Pacific group, regional coordinator is India. We have Latin American and the Caribbean, known as GRULAC. And we have Group B, which is basically the industrialized countries. So you've got Canada, US, Switzerland, Japan, plus some of the EU member states. The European Union also is a group on its own, and it's the country that has the presidency that coordinates that group. So at the moment, that's France. Then we have Central European and Baltic states, known as the CEBS group, and we have a group known as CACIC, Central Asia, Central and Eastern European, and the Caucasus. And then we have China, which is in its own group. And as you can see, some of these groups are overlapping, so they will coordinate their positions among themselves as well. And how do we organize ourselves? Well, we have EIFL works together with our allies, our library allies, with other library institutions and associations like IFLA, like AFLIA, like EBLIDA, the European Library Association, the Library Copyright Alliance in the US, the German Library Association, and so on. We also work closely together with our global allies, the archives, the museums, Education International, Creative Commons, Wikimedia, Knowledge Ecology International. So there's a big coalition of civil society organizations that work together to support each other on our issues. And what are our issues? Well, in essence, we want global copyright laws that support libraries and the people who use libraries. And that's in any format and wherever you are in the world. And if you'd like more information about WIPO and how WIPO works and what are the copyright issues, I recommend that you take a look at IFLA's series of webinars that they did last year called Get Into WIPO. So there was a global webinar for all countries, and then there were regional webinars on looking more on working in WIPO from the regional perspective. So check those out if you'd like some more background information on WIPO and copyright issues in general. So now moving on to the agenda for the SCCR 42. There's 3 main topics on the agenda that are of importance to libraries. One is the protection of broadcasting organizations. The second issue is limitations and exceptions for libraries and archives, for education and research, and persons with other disabilities. And other disabilities in this context means disabilities that were not covered by the Marrakesh Treaty. So for example, people who are deaf. The third issue is public lending right, and that comes under an agenda item of other matters, which includes other issues as well, which don't have their own separate agenda items. Now, in addition, at this SCCR, there will be an information session on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the copyright ecosystem. The information session is not officially part of the agenda of the SCCR, but it's taking place during the SCCR. So it takes place on Monday, the 9th of May. We expect it to start in the morning, which is 10 o'clock Geneva time, Central European time. And it's expected to take up most of the day or a good part of the day on the Monday. And the purpose of the information session is to look at the impact of COVID on the cultural, creative, and educational ecosystems, on copyright-related rights and limitations and exceptions. And the Secretariat put out a request a couple of weeks ago for examples of how COVID had impacted on the work of libraries and archives and education. And EIFL submitted numerous examples from our partner countries, including Kenya, Malawi, South Africa, Zimbabwe. We also submitted some general examples. We cited the ICOC statement that was issued at the beginning of the pandemic, and we talked about the new UNESCO Open Science recommendation. In addition, IFLA and many other civil society groups submitted their own examples as well, and you can see all the examples online at the URL here on the WIPO website. Now, I'm still preparing a couple of other examples from some different countries that we will submit and then will be put online before the meeting. So it's not too late to send in your examples, and if you'd like to share any with us beforehand, send them in to me and we'll be glad to include them. It's a short description, less than 200 words, of what is the issue, what are the key issues, and how does it relate to the COVID pandemic. And I think the more examples we have, the richer the discussion will be, and the more we'll be able to show to the member states how COVID impacted on the work of our institutions during lockdowns, and how it is important that we need to have clear rules to allow online access to copyright protected materials, especially during lockdowns and other emergencies. So on the agenda of the SCCR itself, the first agenda item will be is the protection of broadcasting organizations, which is item number 6 on the agenda. And the protection of broadcasting organizations, that discussion is about a new proposal to create a new right to protect broadcast organizations. So it's a new related right that would protect content, that would give broadcast organizations some rights over the content that they are broadcasting. So it's a kind of, if you like to think of it, it's a new layer of rights on top of already existing copyrights. So from the library perspective, it's important that any new right that is created must have robust limitations and exceptions. And the reason for this is because the limitations and exceptions are essential to be able to access that broadcast content for education and research and preservation and people with disabilities, also to access content within the public domain or openly licensed. And so, you know, it's important that while the committee is discussing limitations and exceptions as a separate agenda item, that in these discussions on creating new rights for broadcasting, we also need to have exceptions and limitations to ensure continued access to content that will be protected or might be protected under this new right. And at the moment, in the draft treaty text, the limitations and exceptions are highly deficient, and they must be improved. And we'll be analysing the text of the latest text of the broadcast treaty, and we'll be making suggestions for how that text can be improved, particularly with regard to limitations and exceptions and access for libraries and education. The second big important agenda item for us at the SCCR is the topic of limitations and exceptions. Now, there are two areas for libraries and archives and education and research, as I mentioned earlier. There is a new proposal by the African group for a work plan or a work program on exceptions and limitations at the SCCR. And so this proposal covers both libraries and archives and education and research. And we think that the proposal is a very good basis for moving forward with discussions on the limitations and exceptions agenda items at the SCCR. And what we can see in the proposal is that it builds on all the work that was done up to 2019. So the discussions that were happening in the SCCR, the regional seminars that took place in 2019, and the international conference that took place in Geneva in 2019. And in 2020, the WIPO Secretariat drafted a report that summarized the discussions that had happened in those regional seminars and at the international conference. And the proposal by the African group picks up on those key priorities that were identified in the report. So we think it's a very good way to pick up on the discussions that had been happening pre-COVID, so that we can move forward now with those, with those topics and building on that existing work in the SCCR as the work starts up again. Then in particular on libraries and archives, which is agenda item 7, the African group proposal has a priority topic to ensure that all laws enable preservation activities of libraries, archives and museums, including use of preserved materials across borders. And during these regional seminars, the preservation came out across in all the regions, that it was identified as a priority area by member states, and it was an area of undisputed importance. Also in the Copyright Committee, there is a broad consensus on the need to support action on preservation. And we know that there is a need and there's an urgency, because we have examples of unique collections in libraries and archives that have been lost to fires and floods and other disaster situations. I mean, in particular, the National Museum of Brazil in 2018 and the University of Cape Town Library in 2021, where some of the unique items in those collections were lost without digital backups because of copyright barriers. So having the committee discuss the issue of preservation and put in place some global rules on preservation that would apply to libraries and institutions in all countries around the world in all formats would be really a great achievement. Then on the limitations and exceptions for education and research and persons with other disabilities, that's agenda item number 8. Again, the African group has a proposal that addresses directly those topics, and that is to promote the adaptation of exceptions to online and cross-border environment that permits teaching, learning and research through digital and online tools. And the COVID pandemic has really shown us that we do need clear rules, in particular for online education and to support online teaching and learning. The proposal also calls for WIPO studies on research rights and text and data mining. So the WIPO has done a number of studies on libraries and education, which are really a great resource. But there hasn't yet been a specific study on research rights, the rights needed to research, and text and data mining, the ability to mine information and data in order to support research. So that would be, I think that would be a very helpful addition to the body of work that the committee has already done on the other limitations and exceptions. And then on the agenda item, other matters, there's a number of issues that are being discussed there, including the rights of theatre directors, the artist's resale right, and the public lending right. From a library perspective, the key issue is public lending right. And public lending right is an obligation on libraries to pay a fee for public lending. There is a proposal for a study on public lending right by 3 member states, by Sierra Leone, Panama, and Malawi. Now, the position of the library community is that we oppose the proposal to have a study because public lending right doesn't in fact involve questions of international copyright law. And we think that there are better and more efficient ways of supporting authors than introducing a new related right, a new public lending right. For example, having targeted financial supports that would be efficient and transparent and would we think provide better value for money, instead of setting up a kind of a new infrastructure, creating a new right, setting up an infrastructure that would be needed to administer any public lending right. And we also know that in the 1990s, public lending right was rejected by WIPO because of it risked having a negative impact on libraries and literacy and development. So how to support libraries and the right to research at the SCCR. So there's a number of different ways in which you can be involved and which you can support. Before the SCCR, there's some concrete, some concrete things that you can do to help. The first thing would be to ask your National Copyright Office to support the library position on the different topics at the SCCR agenda, the topics that I have just mentioned, I've just described just now. And the best way to do that is to send a letter to the Copyright Office setting out in brief what is the library position. And the letter should come from your library consortium or your library association or from your own institution. So you would of course get approval from those bodies, and then in order to send the letter on your behalf. And we can provide support, we can provide a sample letter, and we can also provide contact details for who we think is the best person to contact in the Copyright Office. EIFL is involved in a project which is contributing to public interest copyright policy at WIPO, where there are a number of regional groups supporting copyright, the right to research in international copyright law. So there is a group in Europe, and there's a group in Asia Pacific, and there's a group in Latin America and in North America as well. And EIFL is leading on the region for Africa. So if you are from another region, we would be glad to put you in contact with the regional leads for your region, who can also help you to make contact with the relevant delegates in your Copyright Office. And a good time to send out a sample, to send out a letter with your position could be the week of the 18th of April. So that would be the week after Easter, which is 3 weeks before the SCCR, because that's the time when the delegates are starting to prepare and to get their positions and to coordinate among themselves for this meeting. You could also offer to have a call with them before the meeting, or to answer any questions or to discuss the issues further. And we, of course, are here to provide help and support to answer any of those questions. And if you want to find out directly who is your National Copyright Office, the WIPO website has a database where you can find that information out. If you go to the WIPO website, look up member states and national IP offices, and there you can get the name of you can get the office that's responsible for copyright. So in this example, it's the Kenya Copyright Board, and then you can get the address details, email addresses, and the name of the leaders in those offices. But we can also help you to find that information as well, or to verify that information if you would need it. Now, during the SCCR, there are 3 different ways in which you can follow what's happening or in which you can participate. So this SCCR is meeting in hybrid mode. So that means it's taking place online, and it's also taking place in person. And the easiest way to follow what's happening at the SCCR is to tune into the webcast. So WIPO has a live webcast when the meeting is actually happening. You can follow in real time you can follow online. You can also watch back to the sessions later. So pretty quickly, usually within a day, the recording has been put up online. And there then you can see what is the agenda item and who has been speaking on that agenda item. So you can look down through the list of countries that have spoken, and you can click on the country, and that'll bring you to the part of the recording where they're making their statement. So you can quickly find out, if your country made a statement or made an intervention, and if they did, what did they say during that intervention? The second way to participate is to participate online by registering with an observer organization. So that's where you would actually register to attend the SCCR, and then you would say you are participating online. Then you'll get a link for the online platform that WIPO uses for their meetings. And then when you're logged into that platform, then you can see who else is attending online, and you can chat. So it's a little bit like a Zoom, but a Zoom for WIPO. And then the third way to participate is to attend the meeting in person, and that's where you register with an observer organization, and then you say that you will be attending in person, and then you will be included on the participant list. So at this SCCR, I will be attending in person, and Dick will be attending in person, and there'll also be a couple of other representatives from EIFL as well, we hope, who will be able to be there. And of course, our partner organizations will be attending in person as well. Now, after the SCCR, it's also important to follow up with your delegates. And so, you will, after the SCCR, you will know who attended the meeting, and you will know if who they were, and then you will be able to see, did they make a statement, or if they did make a statement, what did they say? Did they support libraries? If they did, why not? If they did support libraries, we can thank them and acknowledge their support. If they didn't support libraries, we can contact them and ask to have a meeting with them to discuss our issues further. We can also send our statements to them as well and ask for a follow-up meeting. And at the same time, we are preparing and getting ready for the next SCCR, SCCR 43. Now, as far as we understand, the next SCCR will be next year in 2023, but we will get verification of that later on in the year. So I had said earlier, usually the SCCR meets twice a year. On the meeting list, WIPO meeting list for this year, there is just one SCCR currently scheduled for this year, but it's possible that there might be an SCCR later on in the year. So we'll wait for that. So it could either be later on in the year or early next year. So your representatives at the SCCR can either come from the capital, they could be your capital-based experts who are there, or they may be your local Geneva-based, local delegates who are based at the Geneva mission. And you can see who your delegates are on the WIPO Flickr page, where they helpfully put up photographs of all the delegates, and including all the NGOs and the observers who attend the meetings as well. So you're very welcome to join us virtually online beforehand by helping to sensitize your delegates to the issues coming up, and informing your delegates of the library positions, and encouraging your delegates to support libraries and the people who use libraries at WIPO. I've put together also some links where you can find more information on all of these issues. We have the SCCR 42 meeting page, there is the agenda, there's a link to the proposal by the African group, a link to the COVID information session, and a link to the webcasting and the WIPO photos that are online as well.